Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. You've probably heard the story about the man who dreamed he had a conversation with God. Lord, he said, what is 1,000 years to you? And God answered, but a minute, my son. And then the man asked, and what is $1,000,000 to you? And God answered again, just a penny, my son. Then the man asked, Lord, can I have a penny? And God answered, sure, my son, just a minute. There's usually a bit of truth hidden under humor, and the truth here is that God's way is so much bigger than our way. This is the 999th episode of Pastor Gary Live, and tomorrow we will have episode 1000. So it got me curious about the number 1000 in the Bible, and there were many instances listing troop numbers or coins, but there were other times the number 1000 was mentioned that delved a little deeper. We are looking at those references this week. Today I want us to look together at 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. It's a passage we've probably heard before, and maybe the only thing from the tiny book of 2 Peter we know. It says, but do not ignore this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like 1 day. And frankly, the point seems to be the same as that bit of humor I began with today. God's ways are higher and different from our ways. Actually, there's a little bit more going on. You see, when the book of Peter was written, one of the significant problems in the early church that he sought to address was that people were dying and Jesus hadn't come back yet. Everyone expected Jesus to return at any moment, and they thought it would be soon. So when those in faith started to die, people began to wonder at the delay in Jesus' return. What did that mean for those who died? What did it mean for those who were still here? So Peter was speaking to that issue that was raging throughout the early church, and he was pointing out that God's time scale is different from our time scale. What may seem like a long delay for us doesn't seem long to God at all, and God acts in God's wisdom and in God's time, not ours. 1 day is like 1,000 years. So, like we did earlier this week, if that's true literally and we run the numbers, we are now in the extremely early morning hours of day 2 from the resurrection. Now, I don't think we are supposed to interpret that number literally like that, but it does seem to me the larger point is the same. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own limited view of time that we fail to grasp God's more expansive view. The other part of that verse has something powerful to say too. 1,000 years is like 1 day. Our view of time is indeed so limited, and sometimes our limited view puts us in crisis mode when we shouldn't be. For example, many people are worried about the worldwide church right now, or even more specifically about the decline of the American church in our society. For many, it seems organized church is no longer important in their lives. What does that mean, we worry? And like Chicken Little, we run around trying to create programs and look for answers to this problem. While I share those concerns, sometimes I think it might be a bit more faithful not to get so worked up about these issues. This is God's church. We belong to God, and God will make of the church what God wants of it. Our tiny crises of the day don't amount to much in God's grander scheme and God's greater view of time. Let's live in faith and trust in God. I think Psalm 50, verse 10, makes a similar point. Verse 10 reads, For every wild animal of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. In other words, God watches over everything. In the psalm, God is complaining that far too often our worship is simply empty words. In those days, they offered animal sacrifice, and God says, I don't want your sacrifices. I don't need your animals. I have animals on more hills than you can count. God wants our hearts. Nevertheless, the point that God watches over and cares for all things should also not be lost on us. Neither should it be lost on us that the church as a whole is in God's care. And especially neither should it be lost on us that we are in God's care. We may have crises one after another, but we can live in trust. We belong to God, and God will never let us go. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.